Welcome, everybody, to the Monday Night Tours. We are your guides on this journey through the Monday Night Wars. I am Josh Kaiser, and I'm joined today by Kyle Hoagland.
What is going on, everybody? Where is Haddock? Seriously.
It's a good thing, we originally, when we were coming up with names for this podcast, we wanted to call it the Third Man Podcast, in reference, of course, to the Hogan being the third member of the NWO.
Hey, spoilers, we're not there yet.
We are not there yet. It's a good thing we didn't, because it'd be very awkward calling it the Third Man Podcast when we have two of us currently running it. But, that's what happens when you have a kid, I guess.
I feel like we keep on, now at this point, it almost is like the third man, like where he's like a mystery partner.
Yeah, who is going to be the third man? Stay tuned. But that said, Kyle, we are, of course, going through the Monday Night Wars, and this week we are doing the December 18th, 1995 editions of Nitro and Raw. And while, Kyle, there's no NWO, there's plenty of excitement taking place on these shows in some aspects, I guess.
I mean, yeah, I'll go with it. This week, I'll say this. This is a much more jubilant review of, at the very least, Nitro. Although I will have to say, I apologize. I feel so stupid that I thought for the longest time the Masters was in Maine.
Yeah, we're live here at Nitro in Augusta, Georgia, of course, home of the Masters. And I saw your notes that you thought that it was always in Augusta, the capital of Maine, is where the Masters was played.
I didn't know there was another Augusta.
What about there's plenty of probably Augustus or Augusta.
Yeah, well, you travel around working at KFCs. I'm sure you know that you've probably been to 8 Augustas.
I mean, yeah, I guess, it's not that uncommon of a city, but I guess I thought it was a well-known fact that the Masters was played in Georgia, but I guess not. That said, Kyle, it is going to be home for Nitro today, and we go to the commentary booth. Pepe, of course, rocking a bandana and a sombrero, which we later find out from Mongo is because he's a bandito and might be stealing, just like Eddie could be a bandito when he steals Flair's head. Because
apparently Eddie is going to finally get his match against Flair, which I guess he had to get through Pillman first in order to be deemed worthy.
Of course, Kyle, before we get to that, though, we do our normal opening on the show with the commentary booth, and we get one of the most infamous segments of the wars. This is something that's documented heavily these days in any of these documentaries and things you see about the Monday Night Wars. And that's Alundra Blaze, Madusa, whatever you want to call her. She shows up, cuts off the commentary team, Kyle, and they're like, what's going on here? And she basically says, I always was and I always will be Madusa. And she's got the WWF Women's Championship. She takes it, grabs a trash can, and drops it in the trash can and says, WCW is where the big boys play. Well, now it's where the big girls play. And, Kyle, this was a huge deal at the time, and it's still kind of a big deal if you think about it.
Well, she only just recently got inducted into the Hall of Fame because she was basically blacklisted from WWF for 20 years, and this was 95. So we're talking 2015 was when she finally was even able to have any sort of, I guess, affiliation with WWE now. So, yeah, it was a huge deal, and not to mention – when this happened in December of 95, that also the women's title was vacated and defunct for almost 3 years. It wasn't until 1998 when we actually got our next women's champion.
Yeah, and it's we kind of you alluded to this last week, Kyle, with the whole Aja Kong match, how she was squashing Chaparita, and you said she was basically setting up for a match against Alundra Blaze. Of course, it was taped about a month prior to, and now, as you could say, the rest is history. But here we are. We'll see how much Madusa is used in WCW and how the women's, faction
lack of division.
Yeah, the division goes forward. We'll see. Then, Kyle, we get surprised again at the commentary booth. William the Refrigerator Perry's here. Of course, the great Chicago Bear in Augusta, Georgia. It makes perfect sense that he'd be here because he played for the Bears and he played for South Carolina. So why wouldn't he be here in Georgia?
Exactly. I'm glad you did your homework too, because I thought it was just as weird. It's just like if you're gonna do like a cameo, it's usually like you stop at a city and while you're on your way, you're like, hey, we would love to have you. I don't know if he lives there, maybe, or maybe where he's from in South Carolina. Maybe it's a quick drive to Augusta. I don't know, but it just seemed like a very, very peculiar decision to bring in someone like him.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of, like you said, he may live close. And then, of course, he was, it's not his first time, around the wrestling circle, if you will. He was involved in WrestleMania 2, I believe, at Rosemont. I
like how you said Rosemont.
Yeah, that one's for you. But so
Thanks.
he has a little bit of experience there. So, they're trying to bring the celebrities, the athletes, that kind of thing in. And there's a connection there with Mongo. So I don't know. It's weird, but we'll let it be. That said, Kyle, then we get to our opening match, and Ric Flair versus Eddie Guerrero. We alluded to it just a few minutes ago. We're finally going to get the one that we kind of hoped we were going to see a few weeks back when Pillman replaced Flair. And this is I gotta say, Kyle, this is kind of the match you had hoped to see when you get somebody like Ric Flair and a talented up and comer like Eddie Guerrero. And the match, they kind of start out a lot of, feeling each other up early on, sort of trying to get a hold of their opponent. And then Eddie sort of kind of took some heel-ish tactics, but it's almost, a face, because he's a face right now, it can be applauded as a face where he's sort of strutting and mocking Flair, doing a lot of the, kind of slaps.
Yeah, he's trying to make the heel look like a fool.
Right.
Yep.
But then he started getting a little cocky, I thought, Kyle. Tried to win it with a backslide, which only can be done once. And I don't even remember who won with the backslide now, but I just know it happened one time this year, and I don't think we'll ever see it again.
I don't remember, and I feel like we were so proud of that moment that we were there, and we know that it's a real thing, and yet now we don't remember who did it and who did it to who.
I'll have to look it up at some point.
I know it was Nitro. Well, it was Nitro, right?
It was Nitro, yeah. But speaking of things that we don't see very often, Eddie Guerrero hit a tornado DDT here, which I feel like in '95, not something you see all the time. So it's nice to see some of these. It's really just refreshing wrestling when you watch Eddie in the ring compared to most of the other talent and matches you see at this period of time. And honestly, for most of this match, Kyle, Eddie kind of dominated a good portion of it. Until eventually he got knocked to the outside, and I thought it was kind of funny because he lands on the outside and he grabs his one knee, and all of a sudden he, as he grabs his knee, he kind of stops and says, "Oh," almost like "oh shit," and grabs the other knee, and they start on commentary booth referring to this storyline about how he's got a weak knee or currently injured knee, and I'm like, oh, so they're playing that in there. But I thought it was funny that I think Eddie had, it's not the first time they were bringing this knee injury up, and he kayfabe grabbed the wrong knee at first and kind of switched around. I don't know if you noticed that or not.
Honestly, I didn't. I mean, I feel like I'm proud that I nitpick a lot of things, but that was one thing that it didn't seem so egregious. Only because it wasn't like he nailed his knee against a guardrail.
No,
he just kind of landed up with both legs to the ground, so it could have been either knee. I feel like.
Sure. Needless to say, shortly thereafter, Flair kind of works that hurt knee and locks in the figure four and gets the 3 count, Kyle, which you don't see all the time with the Flair figure four. For me, I gave it the match, though, 2.5 stars. I thought it was a solid match. I thought Eddie looked pretty good in a losing situation. And honestly, I was impressed that if they're going to have Eddie, who's been being pushed, pretty hard so far, and Flair, of course, in, main eventer, to have them have a clean victory, no 4 horsemen interference, anything like that. Very happy with that. So, that's what I said, 2.5 stars. How about you?
I mean, before I get my ring, one thing I always love watching is the art of the drop kick, and how if you connect with a drop kick, you easily can spring off and do another drop kick, or get back to your feet and continue the offensive. But if you, for whatever reason, miss your drop kick, then when you actually land on the ground, for some reason you're out. And I just thought that's always one of the funny tropes of wrestling.
You're landing the same way either way. You know, whether you hit the drop kick or not, you're landing on your side or your back or whatever the case may be. And for whatever reason, when you don't connect with it is when it hurts.
Exactly. As far as the actual match itself, I did enjoy it. I wasn't expecting this to be like some sort of like what we've been used to seeing Eddie Guerrero minus Sergeant Pittman, but pretty much all of his other matches, they usually put him with somebody that they can kind of, I guess, work off each other's athleticism. You weren't going to get that with a guy in his at this point I think early 40s in Ric Flair, and I might be being nice and saying early 40s. I really don't remember how old he was. But yeah, I thought it was a very good match. It really made Eddie look very gutsy. I think it really just made both wrestlers look better coming out of it, and I think that was the whole goal. And I would have given it 2.5 stars like you did. I gave it 2 3/4 because of the pinfall via figure 4. You don't see it too often. I thought it was done correctly in this match.
Ric Flair was 46, by the way, at the time.
Jeez, I was giving him benefit of the doubt.
Yes, you were. But yeah, I agree with everything you said there. So then after the match, Kyle, we get Mean Gene doing his, I think, contractually obligated segment where he interviews Ric Flair.
I'm waiting for the Jimmy Hart interview at some point.
And Arn Anderson shows up. And, of course, they start attacking Eddie Guerrero in the ring while Gene's getting ready to interview him. And I tell you what, Gene said, you better cut that shit out, boys, or I'm going to end this interview right away. So
Gene ain't nobody's fool.
No, he's not. Gene is not going to play around. Arn Anderson gets on the mic. Kyle kind of says he respects Paul Orndorff. Of course, the big attack that the Horsemen, put Orndorff out of commission, quote into retirement, so to speak, last week. Basically says, he respects Orndorff, but Orndorff attacked one of them being the Horsemen, the 3 Horsemen, because I'm still not sure Benoit is actually the 4th Horseman because I don't see him anymore. And then the Taskmaster and Jimmy Hart interrupt this, and basically, they say you better control that loose cannon, Brian Pillman, because, of course, Pillman had called out the Dungeon of Doom as part of his, rant last week. And Flair gets on there and says, everything's all good. Don't worry about it. We got it. But then Arn Anderson says, no, we don't. If the Dungeon comes and attacks Pillman, then they're going to have to deal with the Horsemen.
Some good cop, bad cop bullshit right there.
They're kind of going back and forth, and basically the Horsemen say we're going to defend each other, and Dungeon say, hey, keep your guy out of here. So looks like a little dissension amongst the heels here, Kyle. So we go back to the commentary team, and basically that's what they're talking about. Whose allegiance, are the Dungeon and Horsemen going to be, is there allegiance there? Are Sting and, Hogan still friends? And Bobby Heenan says there's no allegiances to life. So he gets very philosophical on us, Kyle.
Do you ever wonder why is it that the heels are friends? That's always been a weird mechanic where like if they're not affiliated with each other, they're still like, well, what's up with our allegiance? And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, well, the only thing that we have in common is we both like hate the mega faces, but that's about it. Yeah, it's not like every face on the show is buddy with every face on the show. Right.
And every heel shouldn't be the same way. And I feel like this is a big thing in WWF. You saw that with the Survivor Series matches. It seemed like the heels were, buddies and the faces were buddies. But, this will be something I think that changes going forward, especially when Austin's kind of like I don't have friends. I don't, I don't care about any of you guys. So that'll change.
Well, it always seems like the faces are the ones like, oh, can this guy trust this guy? But then the people who are the most untrustworthy people on the card are like, oh, yeah, they get along great with the other fucking heels. Right. Never made sense to me.
What also never made sense, Kyle, of course, is at this moment the commentary team is interrupted again. This time not by Madusa, but by your boy, the Pitbull Pittman, Kyle. He comes up, says basically he's struggling, he's floundering, he needs some help, Kyle, and he wants to hire the managerial services of Bobby Heenan. And Bobby Heenan, who knows a loser when he sees one, says, I'm retired, I'm not managing, I got this whole commentary gig, but I'll put you in touch with some people. Maybe Jimmy Hart could be, look forward to taking you on as a client, that kind of thing. Pittman basically says he's going to take no prisoners if he doesn't get help soon. So,
which is a rather peculiar threat for I need a manager.
What do you think, Kyle? Do you think Pittman will do well with Jimmy Hart or somebody else?
And by that you mean we'll probably not see him again after probably 97. Then sure. It's 95. So no, I do know who his manager is because I remember I remembered who he was when he had a manager and not when he was solo. So I'll tease that. It's a
All
person
right.
you know. It is a person that you know. And but yeah, as far as I remember, Pittman doesn't really do much more with his career. So without saying too much, yeah, Pittman's basically going to stay where he is.
Let's hope for Virgil. That said, Kyle, the next match coming up here, we got Lex Luger with Jimmy Hart going up against Marcus Bagwell, of course, of the American Males. And Scotty Riggs is with them at some point. He just kind of randomly shows up at some point. I don't remember.
Kind of like Arn Anderson did.
Yeah,
in the
it's
Flair
just
match.
Weird. I don't know if you noticed the child who had Flex with Lex painted on his face with by painted, I mean he took like a Sharpie and wrote it on his face. And Kyle, they kind of handled Lex's entrance this week better as far as, him not high-fiving the crowd. And by that, I mean they cut to the ring when he was coming out, so you couldn't tell whether he was high-fiving the crowd or not. I think they just saved Lex from himself.
All I know is that he still hasn't learned how to properly high five anybody, especially Jimmy Hart. They haven't figured it out yet.
There's really not much to say about this match, Kyle. I don't know if you have anything you want to talk about directly with the match. Lex, of course, is going to win with the torture rack. And, for me, I give it a 1 3/4. It really wasn't much of anything. It was fine, I guess. The only thing I want to add is Lex took a drop kick off the apron, and it might have been the worst sell job I've seen in a while.
Yeah, that wasn't what I took from it, but I also gave it 1 3/4 stars. This is now the second week in a row that Lex is looking like an utter buffoon against mid-card or lower talent, and it makes no sense. He's a main eventer, or he's supposed to be billed as one, but yet you had Hacksaw last week. You got Bagwell this week, and this is not Buff Bagwell. This is Marcus Bagwell. And both of those matches, really, the faces and or the guys taking on Luger looked really good, and Luger looked like he was floundering out there trying to save his own career. And either he needed Jimmy Hart or some underhanded heel tactic in order to beat both guys. So I just think that that's not a good look for Lex.
Well, don't worry, Kyle. They will save him with the post-match interview because Lex is best known for his mic skills. So Jimmy Hart gets on there with starts hyping Lex as the uncrowned champ, and Lex gets on there and he is gassed from this 3-minute squash match, whatever it was. The dude could not stop breathing and panting, and just looks complete. Like, for a guy who's so well in shape, he is so not in ring shape.
Well, yeah, it feels like he's in shape when it's at that where he can go to the gym and lift weights, but I don't know about his cardio. And I think Lex played it off, actually, because when he got the mic in his face, I think he was like I'm panting with excitement, or he said something of that nature, like he's saying I'm losing my breath from this excitement. Like, no, dude, you're out of shape.
Yeah. He also wants some footage to show, Kyle, which was weird because he says it, nobody comments on it, and no footage is shown. So don't know what that was all about. I don't know if that was Lex.
He said that he has the footage where it shows that he had Macho in the torture rack, and then he also had him pinned, and if it wasn't for Hogan, and I got the footage that I want everybody to see, and then it was like Mean Gene's like, all right, thanks, man, take it.
Speaking of Gene, he tried to end this interview about 3 times to put us all out of our misery, and they kept this interview somebody kept talking. It was like rambling. It just went on entirely too long, and did Lex really no favors. But after that, Kyle, we get our WCW Saturday Night promo. And this week we get Arn Anderson against Mr. Saturday Night himself, Johnny V. Bad, with the doll. Apparently she's not Kimberly now. She's the doll. Or they're bouncing back and forth. Who knows? VK Wall Street still hanging on Saturday nights, going up against Alex Wright. And the Pittman, the Pitbull Pittman, Kyle, he's going to be wrestling against his arch nemesis Cobra, of course, from that Fall Brawl War Games rematch, and probably a match they've had 7 other times. Luger's going to be here, and there's an interesting interview with Sting. So, hell of a card we got coming up this Saturday night.
Well, I figured Lex is going to be there because Sting probably drove him there because, they're buddies.
Right.
And if Sting's going to be there, they might as well get him on TV, too.
Speaking of getting Sting on TV, the next match we get is Sting against the Earl Robert Eaton with his manager, whatever you want to, valet, Jeeves, which they all talk about what a terrible, awful name Jeeves is, and Bischoff even quips that it sounds like a skin condition. Again, Kyle, this is going to be another squash match here, so instead of kind of breaking it down, I think we both had a couple little notes that we noticed about this match. Heenan says a friend in need is a pest, which I just love the little Heenan quotes like that. Bischoff, meanwhile, spoke a lot about Bruce Springsteen. I don't even know why. I don't know if where was he trying to correlate Springsteen into all of this?
He was quoting. I don't remember where the correlation exactly was, but I know it was when Sting was coming to the ring. I think it was something to do with like trust and friendship, and like once again, the Sting and Lex, right, dynamic for the 80 millionth time. But once again, this is not the first time that he has decided to pull out a Springsteen quote in the show.
The boss is a fan of the boss, man. What can you say?
That turtleneck wearing, my God, he looked like Mr. Rogers today.
And they at one point they're talking about, because they are talking about friendship and who can trust who out there, if Lex and Sting can get along in the ring. And they talked about when Reggie White, I don't remember if it was Heenan that asked, I think it might have been Heenan that asked Mongo.
It was Heenan.
Hey, Mongo, when you and Reggie White are on the field, do you guys, how do you guys get it, do you guys get after it, play dirty? He says, no, we play fair. Well, Reggie White and Mongo were both defensive linemen, so there's no way they ever went head-to-head against each other, so not sure what they meant by that. This match was so not entertaining, Kyle, that the crowd started doing the wave and getting themselves over. So,
which I find funny because Sting tried, God bless him, he tried doing what he could do. Like, if he saw that the crowd was doing that, he would just, yell a big woo, and everybody gave him a good cheap pop. But the moment that it was back to the match, it was just the crowd was not into the match at all. And it just came down to they know what was going to happen. Like, Earl Eaton is not going to all of a sudden like pull off a victory.
Yeah, Bobby Eaton's glory days are in the past, unfortunately, and he would eat a Stinger splash into the Scorpion Deathlock. Sting would win this, Kyle. Of course, Sting is on a roll. I think everybody's on a roll these days. For me, I gave it a star and 3/4. It was a squash match. It was okay, though, I guess. It was a fine squash match. But Sting barely lost any face paint. And as Mongo said, it was over faster than a Tyson McNeely fight, which, of course, I had to go in and research. Tyson boxed Peter McNeely back in August of 95, Kyle. This was Tyson's first boxing match in over 4 years since he was arrested for rape charges. And he won the match in 89 seconds via disqualification, something you don't hear very often in boxing. But basically, he beat the shit out of McNeely so quickly that McNeely's manager got into the ring before it was a KO, and by entering the ring, got McNeely disqualified. So there's your little fun fact of this match. And what'd you think about it? Not the McNeely match, but the Sting match.
I figured as much. I didn't get a chance to watch that 89-second squash match. But this squash match, I gave it 2 stars. I think this is actually about as good of a squash match as I could imagine, except for the fact that the crowd wasn't really focused on the match. But I think I would have given it just a star and 3/4. There are certain things in my matches that I like to give a bonus quarter star for whatever reason. And in this one in particular, it was the way that Eaton oversold the Stinger Splash, which I thought was just like Shawn Michaels type of overselling. It was just almost too kooky and hilarious. But it was better than Luger and Bagwell because at the very least, when Sting was on the defensive, he didn't look like a completely talentless piece of shit when it was going. So for that, I gave it 2 stars.
Fair enough. After that, Kyle, Mean Gene is going. He's pretty busy tonight. He's
in overtime.
He's basically interviewing every winner of every match, and he's talking to Sting. He did say, though, Kyle, he'd rather be horsing down some eggnog, but instead he's stuck here with Sting. So it's kind of a diss at Sting, I guess. I don't know where Gene.
Apparently, doing his job and talking to one of the biggest mega faces in the world is not as good as drinking some good old eggnog.
Well, Gene's got that shit spiked.
Oh, I think he has to. It's medication for him at this point.
That's right. Basically, Sting says, yeah, I got that New Japan match, but let's talk about the Triangle match. So even Sting doesn't give a shit about the Mysteries of the Orient. He's all there about the Triangle match. And, it doesn't really say a whole lot. That's about it.
Speaking of which, are you just as shocked as I was that they didn't do one single Starrcade promo on this whole show?
I didn't notice. It was one of those things like when I read it in your notes, I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. They didn't. Very shocking given that these people, they usually put 2 or 3 of those promos throughout the show. But to not see it at all was interesting.
And they did not go to commercial. I mean, there was a lot of squash matches. I don't know when you would have had the chance to. Right. But they didn't even go to commercial during matches. Well, at least not until the main event. They do it. But I was actually overall, just from a production standpoint, very well done this week.
Now, we may not have got a promo, Kyle, for Starrcade, but we did get one for the Halloween Havoc Man vs. Machine, which, of course, or Machine vs. Machine, Man vs. Man. Haven't heard that one in a while. Obviously, Halloween Havoc out on VHS, so get your copy today. And then, Kyle, we've got our main event, the World Heavyweight Championship. Macho Man Randy Savage defending his title against the Giant, coming out with the Taskmaster and Jimmy Hart. Or as Mongo likes to say, 2 weasels and a big stinky giant. So
I'm convinced Hogan wrote his stuff.
Absolutely. Then Hogan probably did not write the sign in the crowd, Kyle, which said, Macho Man rules, Giant drools, which is a classic 90s child's diss. Always good to see that. It always reminds me of Homeward Bound when they say cats rule and dogs drool.
Hey, it was an incredible journey.
It sure was. And all of a sudden the commentary team says, oh, yeah, I think the rumor around is Hogan is actually in here in the arena tonight, but nobody's seen him. Mongo says he's keeping the Dungeons of Duds at bay. So good diss, Mongo. Bobby Heenan says he got here early to park cars, which... I just
that would be sweet.
Heenan.
That would be that's it. That actually would be if you and I went to a Raw like a Raw show like now, and we go in there and we go to the valet, and then like Seth Rollins just parking our car for us. That'd be pretty awesome.
Oh, absolutely. That said, Kyle, Hogan was not parking cars, or maybe he was, but he does get involved in the match at some point here. But before he gets into the match, we had a pretty solid match between Macho Man and Giant. What'd you think about it?
I mean, I first went into this match thinking like, well, I feel like Macho Man's gonna have to carry a lot of this match. We've been talking so much about how the Giant's kind of green right at this point. Not a whole lot of matches under his belt, or at least nothing where he's gonna have to, carry a match for more than 2 minutes. And so I was very interested to see how this would go. Macho Man's very good at putting over the heels. And he's good at getting his shit kicked in, basically. So we're kind of wondering, or I was kind of wondering what kind of Macho Man we were going to have. Was he going to be the Blitzkrieg at the start Macho Man, or was he going to be the guy getting his ass kicked most of the time? And obviously, he was getting his ass kicked for the most part during it. I said, for the most part, there's not really a whole lot to discuss with this. Some things I just wanted to note was there was a lot of I've never seen anything like that before with a lot of things that the Giant does, which I just felt kind of overdone. It's an easy thing to do at the commentary booth.
It's a very cliched comment, yeah.
Right, it's something that you can always pull out of your pocket to mention. And then you get yourself a bear hug. Once again, I understand it's a Giant. I just hate a bear hug. I hate any time that anybody puts a bear hug.
I was just gonna say, as far as the bear hug goes, though, they went to commercial break during it, which is the ideal time to go to a commercial break during a match.
Right, I agree. I think he did release the hold right when they went to it. I think he threw him to the ground, like right when they went to commercial. But either way, you're right though. Like that is when obviously everything's kind of slowed down. Go to commercial.
Nobody's tapping to the bear hug, so you know that it's a safe time to go to commercial.
Yeah, exactly. Savage fights back a little bit. He actually does some heel tactic. He basically just rakes the eyes for a solid 15 seconds straight in front of the ref. And you would think Randy Anderson and his referee pedigree, he would probably do something about it. But no, he kind of just follows around and just just kind of wags his finger like the incompetent ref he is. But
would you
I digress.
Expect anything less? Hey, yeah, as the idiots would say.
I was going to say, as the idiots would say, according to Hogan. More work done by the Giant. Another shockingly never seen before thing where Giant tosses Savage back into the ring by tossing him from the outside over the top rope.
To be fair, though, I thought that was a pretty cool spot. I mean, I think it's a good way. You don't see that every day, anyways. You know, for the Giant to take him from the outside and literally gorilla press him over the top rope into the ring. I think that's a good spot to show Giant's size and strength.
And then they decided to show Giant's luchador skills. He goes to the top rope for a splash, and if he was on that turnbuckle for an extra quarter second, he would have biffed hard. But he was able to keep himself enough time, enough up there, and to get Paul White back then was actually surprisingly very agile. He's a very, actually for his size, decently agile person. But when he went to that top rope, it was kind of like he was about to do a splash, and then you could tell his left knee, it was almost like the ropes weren't ready for his size or weight, and it kind of bowed a little bit, like
they probably didn't reinforce the ring,
right.
They do on Raw.
Yeah, well, whatever the case may be, Giant when he was about to go for the splash, it definitely the ropes definitely gave way a little bit, and I think he wasn't ready for it, but he did hold on. Went for the splash. He did miss the splash because if Giant were to actually hit the splash, that would have been over. I mean, to me, no one gets up from the Giant doing a top rope splash to anybody. But that was a pretty big spot from the match. Macho Man then goes for the elbow drop and he hits it. So you're thinking, oh, Macho Man's going to retain. That's his special. I keep saying special like it's a video game. That's his finisher. But Giant actually gorilla presses him off at 2, which was kind of shocking. I didn't think that he would just scoff at
I was
Macho
a
Man's.
little surprised by that too, but I thought it was great booking idea right there. A great booking decision to have Macho hit his signature and for Giant to basically throw him off of him.
Yeah, just kind of like wiping it off him like it was nothing.
Right.
And then Bischoff mentioned 2 or 3 times about how he threw him the way you would throw a loaf of bread. Like throwing a loaf of bread is something that people do. There were just a lot of very
I mean, if I'm
going to
throw a loaf of bread, I'm going to gorilla press it off of my chest, like a nice chest pressed.
I can go with that. But if I feel like I'm doing that, I'd have like a whole baguette, something that I can actually have where I have both my hands, in the gorilla press.
What about like
situation.
a pumpernickel or something? Could you do it to a pumpernickel?
Well, if a pumpernickel has to be at least 2 feet long, so if you give me a 2 foot long pumpernickel, absolutely.
Maybe a nice marble rye. Maybe that'll work.
I feel like we've definitely milked this. So, so I was going to say before that this match had a lot of very original and creative spots. The next one was Giant exposes the bare concrete. I know you love that spot where they do that, where they expose the naked concrete.
I think it looks like a brutal hit, a brutal spot when they land on that bare concrete. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with that too because I've been in real rings before and I have been suplexed before in a regular ring and it fucking hurts if you don't know how to take one. So imagine taking that to the floor. Macho Man actually wiggles his way where he's able to hook to the ropes, which then causes Giant to suplex a phantom nobody and just falls to the ground and lands on the concrete. I thought it was actually good scripting.
It was a cool spot. It was kind of not to be confused with the 7-Up, mascot, but it was a cool spot there. The only thing I thought was interesting is Macho Man tried to hook himself and pull himself into the ring, but it looked like Randy Anderson kind of pulled him into the ring too, didn't it? Like he helped.
He was near. I didn't really notice that much, but yeah, it did look like maybe Randy Anderson wanted to make sure that once it got hooked on, I think he was just trying to help Macho get into the ring. But then the thing that got really weird was Giant falls to the concrete, right? Exposed concrete. He hits it hard. They're saying he hit the back of his head. Giant gets up and no-sells the fuck out of that. It just gets right back in the ring and choke slams Macho Man, who, by the way, was doing some sort of crouching tiger, drunken dragon, kind of woozy dance into the middle of the ring for a bit. But he gets a choke slam for his troubles, which that should have been the match. Giant should have just pinned him. But instead, he doesn't. He doesn't pin him, and you wonder why. Well, obviously, the reason why is because he's stalling for time because, Hogan's not exactly the fastest man, but Hogan does come down and ultimately stops the pin after a leg drop. I think it was by the Giant.
Giant
he goes for the pin.
Hogan's finisher.
well, that's why Hogan came down. He was like, dude, you're not beating Hogan with my finisher. And Hogan comes in, hits him with the chair, and we know how lethal Hogan's chair shots are. And your winner, put it in the record books that it was the Giant, but by disqualification. So Macho Man holds on to the title.
What'd you rate the match?
This was actually very close to a 3-star match. I think Savage does what he does best, which is, like I said, making the heels like very, very strong and a force. The Giant was surprisingly impressive. I think the last time we saw him in a match, it was, it kind of like give or take a couple of things, but he was also taking on Scott Flash Norton. So you take that for what it is. It's all about who you're. A lot of times it seems like more than half of a good match is who you're going up against and who you can work with. But it was kind of weird how they booked it, though, especially for the ending, because Giant basically was on the verge of squashing Savage and then just winning the title straight up without any type of interference or cheating for a heel. And then that way, if he was cheating, then Hogan might have been justified to coming in and breaking up the pin, kind of like the way he did with Luger. But that wasn't the case this time with the Giant. In this case, though, Macho was clearly beaten by the person who was better than him. And Hogan just came in and just saved him of the title. So this would have been about a 3-star match, honestly, just because of how impressed I was with the Giant. But I gave it 2 3/4 because of the ending.
Yeah, I gave it 2.5 stars, and I mean, I did enjoy the match. I thought for this is easily Giant's best match so far. I think this is his rookie year, so to speak. So he's been very green in a lot of his matches, but I thought he looked pretty good here. Obviously, a lot of that Macho helped it out. And just the ending with Hogan interfering just kind of ruined it a little bit for me, which is why I didn't go any higher. But overall, a solid match. That said, Kyle, after the match, Hogan does continue his vicious assault with chair shots. Mongo and the refrigerator Perry come out, and Perry takes a chair shot, which he kind of no-sells. And eventually Mean Gene gets a hold of Hogan, and Hogan, tries to figure out. Gene's like, what's going on, brother? And Hogan basically says, everyone's on probation. Like
Gene did not say brother.
No, he didn't. I may be paraphrasing. He says, what's going on, gentlemen? And Hogan basically says, I'm on probation, Flair's on probation, Giant's on probation, and they get world title shots, and I don't get anything. And then the Giant's trying to come back out and attack Hogan. So what happens? He is held back by the Taskmaster and Craig the Pitbull Pittman, Kyle. So your boy getting a lot of airtime tonight. And
hey, maybe he already got to Jimmy Hart.
While he's being held, of course, Hogan comes out and delivers one of the most vicious chair shots you will ever see. I believe you tweeted out a little video of it.
Yeah, I had to gift that because it was so funny because it was so bad. It was just Hogan running at like 3/4 speed and then just kind of like tapping him on the head and running off. Yeah. It just felt like such a weird like drive-by chair shot.
It really was. And then Hogan does he starts talking to Macho Man, says his name's on that belt and you owe me a title shot. I didn't notice, Kyle, but if his name is still on the belt, we've got some serious problems here. And then
especially because they called it out weeks ago. That's the thing that's even more unforgivable about it.
And then I like it is they're saying, Macho Man, or they're asking Macho Man, what do you think about Hogan running around chair shots, beating the shit out of people, really unfairly? And Macho Man says, looks like Hogan went a little Looney Tunes, which apparently is his way of saying, it's okay because he's a face. And Macho Man basically says, hey, I'll give you that, world title match after I defend my title next week against Flair, which now, Kyle, we've got a world title match on Nitro, Macho Man versus Flair, which seems crazy to me that Flair gets a world title match, even though he has a triangle match to decide if he deserves the world title match at the pay-per-view. But hey, what the hell?
Well, I think what makes this even more bullshit is that now, so Luger got a title shot, Giant got a title shot. Flair gets a title shot, and then you've got the third guy in the triangle match, Sting, who gets jack shit. And he's on a roll, everybody.
That's right. He is on a roll. Maybe that's why they don't want to give it to him just yet. But anyways, Macho Man says, after I defended against Flair, and then I defended it the triangle match, then Hogan, after that, it's me versus you. So apparently that's that's all Hogan wanted to hear. And then Hogan does add that he respects Mongo and the William Perry for their work on the football field, but they came into his house and that's why they got those chair shots. And
classic face work again.
Then we close out. Mongo basically says he had to save Hogan from himself because he knows he's on probation, and now with this interference and chair shot palooza, that there's a chance maybe he'll get suspended. And Heenan quips that he never saw Perry move that fast except for when Ditka handed him the ball, which I had to look up. Perry actually had 5 rushing touchdowns, which you got to love. And then he says the only other time he moved that fast was when Ditka handed the ball or when they opened a buffet line. So classic Heenan there. And that's our show, Kyle, as they kind of get us ready for next week's Nitro, the final Nitro of the year. That said, Kyle, what did you think about this Nitro?
I thoroughly enjoyed it from end to end, to be honest. It was a very exciting Nitro. Hell, even Hogan, who has no storyline to really speak of right now other than the unhinged man on probation swinging chairs at everybody whose name is not Macho Man. That includes refs and J.J. Dillon and not J.J. Dillon. Who's their security guy? Todd Dillinger, right? Isn't that Dillinger?
Dillinger, yeah.
Yeah. So he basically just hits everybody with everything except for Macho Man. And actually, Hogan got a big pop in Augusta, Georgia, which was kind of a nice thing because he's been getting booed a lot lately, and maybe that's the reason why they kept him off TV for a little bit and having him come in during saves is that maybe kind of get him a little bit more of his pop back, so kind of keep him off matches and keep him out of the world title situation since he's been in it for over a year now. There was a lot of matches on this card. And all of them were actually not bad. I mean, once again, I think only one of them we rated it below a 2-star, or at least I did, and I think that was the Luger match. But there's a lot of buzz going on, and I think WCW is doing a great job keeping the show interesting because it's very chaotic, but it's a good kind of chaotic. It doesn't feel scripted. It really does feel like anything can happen in the WCW. So, and finally, I just wanted to say, props to the Giant. I thought that he did a much better job than I thought he would in his match against Macho Man. Maybe I should give Macho Man more of the credit, but ultimately, that match I thought could have possibly been a dud. It was a lot better than I thought.
Yeah, I agree. Nitro definitely came strong. The matches were pretty good. You had the infamous Madusa segment that will be seen for years and years to come, and was really a big deal and shouldn't be, thought of as anything less than that. Squash matches were even okay. And then ultimately, I think Giant and Macho Man, was a great main event. And, they continued to build pretty well as we go forward to Starrcade, even though that we get these weird title matches pushed on us every week now. Which would be cool, with the exception that they have this Starrcade main event triangle match kind of thing. So we'll see, Kyle. That said, as we move over to Raw now, it's the follow-up show, Kyle, to the In Your House 5, and we open the show up by recapping the ending of In Your House 5, which involved Undertaker and Diesel getting face to face with each other, and Vince sort of talking about it and saying, you'll find out later tonight why they were so up in each other's faces. And it's always interesting, Kyle, the day after, because they are live. They always do those live shows, and then now probably for the next 3 or 4 weeks it'll be a tape show. But actually, I don't know if it's going to be that way or not with the holidays and things like that. We'll have to see what they do. But this week we're live from Newark, Delaware, not Newark, Maine, Kyle. Just for your benefit.
I know of Newark, New Jersey. Oh wait, it's Newark, Delaware.
Yeah, it's Newark, Delaware, not Newark.
Yeah, I mean, I suck. There's also in Newark, New Jersey. They're screwing me over with these cities.
Yeah, gotta love that. We got Vincent King, of course, opening the show, Kyle, discussing what's going to be going on tonight's show. You've got Razor Ramon versus Yokozuna for that Intercontinental title, which we knew was kind of our main event from last week. They told us that. We'll get an update on Shawn Michaels, because why the hell wouldn't we? It's become a weekly segment. And then they're going to discuss this whole Undertaker and Diesel feud, or disagreement or argument or whatever the case may be. But in our opening bout, Kyle, we get Jeff Jarrett versus Fatu. Of course, this is one of the big things if you guys did not watch In Your House 5. Jeff Jarrett makes his grand return to the WWF, and they show a recap from In Your House where he had his gold record, a framed picture of his gold record, an album, and he bashes Ahmed Johnson over the head with it. So you can kind of see there's some Ahmed Johnson, Jeff Jarrett in the future, perhaps.
Even Ahmed Johnson couldn't sell that. He went down to one knee when he got hit with a framed picture. Yeah. You think you're supposed to be kind of taken out when you get hit by an object like that. And he just kind of goes down to one knee, kind of shakes his head like, "Oh man."
But this match, Kyle, there's not a whole lot to say about it. From a booking standpoint, you brought this up. It was interesting to see Fatu and Jeff Jarrett because this is sort of WCW-esque in that it's not you're not sure if it's a squash match or not. It's two guys that Jeff Jarrett obviously making his return. You think he's gonna win this match, but then Fatu he's been on a roll, if I can say that.
I think that's a trademark of Nitro.
Yeah, right. But the match was involved Jeff Jarrett doing a lot of his Flair impersonations, the little strut that he's got there. And finally, Fatu has seen enough, kind of takes it, retaliates to it. And I have to admit, Kyle, they went to commercial breaks during this match, and they did it at an appropriate time. So here they are live, and they can do commercial breaks appropriately. But when it's a pre-produced show, they do it at the worst fucking time. It makes I don't get it. I don't get how they screwed that up.
Yeah, I know. I feel like when they do a live show, there's much more choreography because you have to. You are on a particular time frame that you have to adhere to. Whereas when it's pre-canned, they can go long. They can go long and they can cut it. But when you're live, you definitely have to be the moment that they go to a commercial break, I think the ref has to tell the guys, "Hey, we're going to a commercial break now in a couple of minutes. Finish your last big spot, and then we're going to do some slowdown during the commercial." That's how you're supposed to do it. I don't know how WCW does it, but that's usually how you're supposed to do it. But when you're in a tape show, I don't think the wrestlers know, or neither does the ref know when they go on commercial. So they just go through the whole match as they would.
Right. Well, either way, they got it right here. And then, Kyle, I just had to make a comment about the Vince-isms. You always make a comment that does the back body drop. But he also, I've started to notice he does the 1, 2, 3. Yes, he got it. Oh, no, he didn't. And he's a big fan of doing that. 1, 2, yes, no. Oh, no, not yet.
He always goes to 11 and then dials it back down to 3.
Right. Ultimately, in this match, though, they start telling the story that Fatu's got a hurt shoulder, and he ends up doing a running RKO, which re-injures the shoulder, which, of course, sets up for the figure 4 because that has anything to do with the shoulder. I don't know.
Right.
Needless to say, Kyle, Ahmed Johnson comes in and attacks Jeff Jarrett, getting his retaliation for the In Your House attack, which does, in the record books, put Jeff Jarrett as your winner, which Vince lets you know. Ultimately, Kyle, this match for me was 2 stars. I thought it was going to be like a standard squash match for Jeff Jarrett, but it kind of wasn't. They protected Fatu enough with the Ahmed interference, and it was it was okay match. It wasn't anything great, but I thought it was solid. And ultimately, Kyle, 2 stars because Ahmed Johnson was involved in the show without having to wrestle, and you always got to appreciate that.
Well, I mean, that's only coming from you. I'm not as much of an Ahmed hater as you are. I gave this 1.5 stars. I was actually a little bit meaner with this one. I think there were a lot of points in the matches where their exchanges were not very good. I think you could tell that Jeff Jarrett needs a little bit more time to get the rust off. Even Vince made a note of that. I think even when Fatu had a bad exchange with Jarrett and just kind of knocked him down, Fatu even kind of looked at the crowd and was kind of just shrugged it off and smiled, knowing yeah, that kind of looked bad. And but we're just going to keep on going forward with it. I think that really it was not paced very well. Fatu and Double J are definitely more capable of having a better match. I do agree, though, that I think the ending was appropriate. Nobody really buried the other. So yeah, I do agree with that, but not enough crispness in this match to give it a 2-star match. So I get 1.5.
Fair enough, Kyle. Then after this match, we get Doc Hendricks, who's backstage with Gorilla Monsoon.
By the way, how long is it before you're no longer the interim president? I feel like he's been the interim president for about 9 or 10 months now.
Right. At some point, you just are the president.
Yeah, you're just the president.
But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see if he gets replaced or if he just keeps on rolling. But he does discuss the card for Royal Rumble, Kyle, which, of course, is the next pay-per-view coming up, and one I'm looking forward to watching and reliving. But he says Undertaker versus Bret Hart, of course, is going to be the WWF World Heavyweight title match. And obviously, Kyle, this is what Diesel's upset about, and Gorilla Monsoon says Diesel can put on his big boy pants and get over it. But, to be fair, Diesel never got a rematch, and I feel like there should be that whole rematch clause, right?
He was a champion for over a year. He loses one match, and then it's like, oh, you're no longer the number one contender. Like, no, that's crap. That is total utter crap. I also just find that one thing that WWF does a really bad job of is, and it feels weird at me saying this. Maybe they just did a bad job with the In Your House. You notice that Bret Hart, he did defend his title against the British Bulldog, but I feel like with as much as they've been talking about that match, they've been hyping it, they hardly speak of that match on the show, and it's their main title.
You're right. They really don't mention it. They discuss Diesel's, being upset that Taker's in the next defense for Bret Hart, but other than that, you really wouldn't know what happened in that match. It definitely was not Wembley Stadium 1992. I can tell you that much.
No, I from what I remember, it was a very lukewarm, okay match.
Actually, it was an okay match, but it was, it was apparently not as memorable. But Monsoon does go on and say that Jeff Jarrett, who of course at In Your House the night before declared himself as the first entrant into the Royal Rumble, not number one, but the first one that's going to be one of the 30 to be involved. Monsoon says, no, you just cannot declare yourself into that Royal Rumble, and instead you're going to have a match with Ahmed Johnson. So it'll be interesting going forward, Kyle, to see if other people say, like, if Marty Jannetty comes on next week, it's like, I'm going to be in the Royal Rumble. And they say, yeah, that's cool, because that seems to be a thing, even going on to, like,
today.
Yeah, some people will say, like, I'm in, and it's cool. And then, like, a heel will say, like, I'm in, and they're like, no, you've got to get through Roman Reigns if you want to get into this match. So
yeah, and also I also find it very strange that, like, Jeff Jarrett makes his return by attacking the black man, and nobody wanted to think that was like a racing. Like, there's no heat between Jarrett and Ahmed Johnson, and yet he decided to beat the shit out of Ahmed Johnson for no reason.
He saw
maybe that's why Gorilla Monsoon was not going to have any of that. So that's his punishment. He's going to have to take on the men he attacked in a racially heated way.
There you have it. They will say Gorilla Monsoon did close out by saying they will start announcing some names on Superstars this weekend. You'll hear new and old names alike, so be interested to see who is going to be involved in this year's Royal Rumble. Kyle, then we get a Goldust promo, and this is one of the edgier promos we're going to see this year and probably going forward. This is sort of in some people, actually, speaking of edgier, Edge, in fact, says, people talk about when the Attitude Era started. People debate whether it was, Survivor Series 97, or was it, the Austin character and Austin McMahon, was it, the DX, whatever the case may be. Edge thinks it's Goldust, and he says, Goldust has a big reason why they went into the Attitude Era. And this promo, you could see it, because he gets very, he's talking very dirty.
Just say gay. He's being gay.
It's very, yes. He basically says he likes that, he says Razor's a bad guy, and he likes that in an opponent. And he says that he hopes they can ooze machismo together. So, very bizarre segment here from the strange,
from the bizarre one.
Yeah. But no, it was definitely very edgy, especially for 95 television, for him to have the homoerotic comments made towards Razor Ramon. After that promo, though, we get a recap of Taker and Diesel. Obviously, Diesel's still unhappy with the whole Taker getting the title shot. And then we get Buddy Landel versus Bob Holly. Buddy Landel, of course, the Nature Boy, he made his debut return to WWF the night before to replace Dean Douglas. Of course, Kyle, you had mentioned that Dean was battling an injury. He did not wrestle Ahmed Johnson. Buddy Landel did instead and jobbed in about a minute and a half, or if not less. And tonight he's wrestling the Spark Plug Bob Holly. So before we get in that match, though, Doc Hendricks continued to replace Barry Dudinsky, selling some WrestleMania the Arcade games for the Super Nintendo, PlayStation, and Sega. And God, games were expensive.
$70 for a Super Nintendo cartridge.
Insane.
Like, that's crack prices back in the 90s.
Just crazy. So when you get mad about spending $50 on a game these days, just know it was worse back in the day, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Kyle, you were a little surprised to see Buddy Landel here, though.
Yeah, I didn't see In Your House 5, so I didn't know that Landel fought Ahmed Johnson, but I think then makes this match even worse. Now that I know that he actually just jobbed in a minute to Ahmed Johnson
very quickly, yeah.
Yeah, and then not to fast forward, but Landel does beat Bob Holly in this match. But for people who don't know who Buddy Landel is, he's also known as Nature Boy number 3. Obviously you have Buddy Rogers, then you had Ric Flair, and then you have Landel. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, he was actually a guy who got a lot of pushes, mainly because of his looks. He looked like, if you took like Greg the Hammer Valentine and Ric Flair and kind of like mushed them together, and you got Buddy Landel.
He definitely has a Greg the Hammer Valentine look to him for sure.
He does. And but this guy basically had all the chance in the world to be a superstar, but he always found a way to screw it up, whether it was he might have had like personal issues with the management in NWA or the other promotions. He also was fired and suspended because he was caught with cocaine, which, by the way, how do you get caught with cocaine in the 80s? I feel like everybody was on cocaine in the 80s. So if no one was getting in trouble for it, if you got in trouble for it, you must have had some like a lot of cocaine or something. I don't know, but it really would have been interesting if the guy stayed kind of straight edged and actually didn't make stupid mistakes with his career. It might have been interesting what kind of career he actually would have had. But ultimately, the way this match doesn't deserve an actual explanation other than really bad exchanges again. Landel wins with it. He just kind of just leans off the ropes and just does like a fancy elbow for the 3 count. I gave this 1.5 stars. This honestly was actually on its way to being a 1.25 star. I almost want to give it a 1.25 just because now I know that he jobbed to Ahmed the night before and then was good enough to beat Bob Holly. I mean, what kind of spit in the face is that to Bob Holly? And but honestly, Bob Holly did some last minute offense. He actually pulled a sting where he was basically taking some shots and not selling them at all and kind of like getting himself revved up because he's a race car driver, and so he kind of saved us from being a 1.5 star, what I call the 1.5 star bin, but really not much better. But the only thing it was also decent booking until I realized that Buddy Landel jobbed the night before, so now I actually don't give a shit about the booking at all.
Yeah, I didn't really feel the match at all. I thought it was strange just because I saw Landel job the night before. I thought he was basically I don't know how long he's wrestling in the WWF or if this is just kind of like a weekend spot that he did. He did, the In Your House and then this show. So I expected him to job here to Holly, even though Holly's been kind of a jobber at this point in his career. But instead, Landel does win with an off-the-rope elbow drop. I gave it a 1.75 stars, and I'm probably being friendly there. After that, Kyle, we get our 90s toy commercials, Hot Shot Basketball, Karate Fighters, Ricochet. Then we get Brother Love discussing with Ted DiBiase. DiBiase gets on here, and he starts talking about Santa Claus because the night before there was a Santa Claus that attacked Savio Vega and got bought out by Ted DiBiase. So he says this is Santa Claus, Claws.
See, I thought he spelled it. I thought it was the same clause. It's still the same clause, but it's Santa with an X. I thought it was like Xanta Claus.
Oh, I thought he spelled it I don't know.
I think he still said Claus. It's a clause, but it's not Santa. It's Xanta with an X. Like it's a name of a prescription drug for whatever stuff.
There you go. Well, either way, he said he takes everything. He lives in the South Pole, and he's part of the $1 Million Corporation. And then he says 96 is going to be the year of the $1 Million Corporation, and it's going to be the year of the $1 Million Champion. So, Kyle, you know what that means.
Well, not for a while. It's going to take a little bit longer for that, but
it does mean that Haddix will likely be joining us back as his favorite of all time. Second favorite of all time.
Second favorite of all time. I think it's a distant second.
Yeah, probably. But look forward to seeing when the ringmaster shows up, and then we got our Raw Bowl promo, Kyle, and then we move to our main event: Yokozuna versus Razor Ramon for the Intercontinental Championship. And I first see Yoko coming out by himself. This is after Yoko, Fuji, Cornette all backed Owen Hart for the Jeff Hardy match last week. This week you get Yoko by himself. Mr. Fuji does show up eventually. He's apparently kind of doing the whole Scotty Riggs, Lex Luger.
Same thing with Cornette. Like Cornette shows up at some point as well.
Does Cornette show up? Yeah.
Yeah, he does. He's wearing like a blue suit or whatever.
Oh, you're right. Yes, he is there. And then King makes a comment about how Art and David Modell sent King a Browns jersey for Christmas. And he brings this joke up a couple of times because apparently it must have fallen on deaf ears the first time. Before Razor comes out, Goldust comes out, and he's got one of his like quote unquote movie usher with him. And then Razor shows up, goes into the ring, and he's showered with gold confetti from the sky. So obviously Goldust is starting to get into Razor's head. And they show a recap of the night before where Goldust gave a gold envelope to Todd Pettengill, who passes it along to Razor. And Razor reads this letter and is furious because of the things written on this letter. So there's a lot of speculation of what might have been written.
And this letter was typed. Like you can see the letters.
Yes.
Through it. It's a long letter, and it looked like Razor read all of it in 6 seconds.
On the card, he reads it in about 15. But yeah, it's pretty quick. Razor's definitely a fast reader, if you will.
He's a speed reader for sure.
Yes. The match itself, Kyle, they told that typical story. You got a 600-pound man in the ring. You're going to have to throw a lot of punches, a lot of off-the-rope clotheslines, and Yoko's going to do a lot of the, you're not going to knock me over, and just when you think you're about to knock me over, I'll knock you over instead. So they build up. They take a commercial break at some point. Again, appropriately timed. They're really doing a good job with their commercial breaks during this live show. So the next taped segment, I'm sure they'll totally screw it up. At one point, they mentioned that if Yoko wins this, of course, he'll have had the tag team titles, the World Championship, now the Intercontinental. He will have been the Grand Slam champion and will replace Newt Gingrich as Time's Man of the Year. So, in case you were just curious, Kyle, Newt Gingrich was the Man's Time of the Year in '95.
Oh, how the times have changed! It's so weird. It's just so. That's also to me very interesting about like what 95 that was considered. Nowadays, like Times Man of the Year, Person of the Year it's such a polarizing thing these days. I feel like it's like I think in '95 it was just kind of like good for you.
Right, exactly. They do give Wembley Stadium another shout out, referring to SummerSlam '92, even though the Bulldog and Bret Hart match has happened the night before, and neither of them are in this match or have anything to do with this match. But why not?
It's just residual. Just let it go. It'll flush itself out soon.
Eventually, the lights start to flicker. They don't go out. It's not like they're getting turned on and off. It's like a light flicker to it, and out comes the Undertaker pushing a casket, a very large casket, which Yokozuna all of a sudden books it the fuck out of here. And is counted out, and that's the end of your match, Kyle. I gave it a 1 3/4. The match was okay. I thought it was starting to tell a decent story, but then the Undertaker's interference is a little strange to me. Like, I know Yokozuna busted his face, which would make sense that they'd have a feud, but Undertaker just beat Mabel the night before the casket match. Now he's got a world title match at Royal Rumble, and he's feuding with Diesel in this Diesel being upset kind of thing. And all of a sudden now he's got this thing with Yoko. Like, I don't know how they're going to squeeze the Yokozuna Undertaker into this whole story. Thought it was just a little weird why they did that. But, yeah, that's why I said a 1 3/4. How about you?
I would have been fine with it if they at least had some substance of explaining why he was doing it. It was just like no rhyme or reason. He was just wheeling out a casket. And I know they've already had a casket match before. I understand that Yokozuna and Kama were kind of like in cahoots for a bit. And, so I understand him not liking Yokozuna, but I feel like there needed to be some more frame of reference to understand why he's doing it at the time he's doing it. As far as the match, I actually really did not like this match at all. I know that this is probably the only match that you could do with a guy like a 600-pound Yokozuna. I don't know. I just, especially since Razor actually had the upper hand. That was also weird that Taker then came out when Razor was actually winning the match. It was just really random. The match I thought was kind of lame. A lot of punching, like you said, a lot of that stupid Vulcan nerve pinch shoulder massage bullshit. That once again, that's what you do when you're a 600-pound man. Yeah, I think we had one bulldog and then a countout win. So if you're going to tell me that you're a 1 3/4 star match basically is punching, some shoulder massages, and a countout, I don't know what to tell you. It's in the 1 1/4 star bin for me, and that's tough for me because you know how much I love Scott Hall. Was actually, and I think it was also because I was actually kind of looking forward to this match since they promoted it last week, and it just did not live up to what I thought it could have been.
Fair enough. After this, Kyle, they say that you're going to coming up. King says the last time you'll ever see Shawn Michaels, possibly. So that, of course, the update on Shawn Michaels is coming soon. We come back. We get our 90s commercials now, which seem to be a regular segment now. They do the WrestleMania, the arcade game, the NFL Quarterback Club, and the Erector set. Then they go to a promo for the Raw Bowl. And I swear I heard 8 stars in one match. And it might be some sort of a Survivor Series type match or something, an 8-man tag. I'm not sure.
I think it's just a 30-minute special one match. I think that's what the Raw Bowl was.
Could be. And they do mention the tag team champion Smoking Guns, Kyle, which we were discussing last week. Whether who are the tag champs and is it still the Smoking Guns and where the hell are they? So finally they'll be back next week. Then we get Doc Hendricks talking to Razor Ramon, and they're discussing the whole Goldust situation. And basically, Razor says, "I don't play that way, man." So Goldust.
By the way, I'm not going to let you get away with that. That was a spot on impression. Well done.
Thank you. And they ask, "What is the details on that letter?" And Goldust Razor basically says, "This is a children's show, so I cannot tell you. It's must have been some very risque stuff written on there, Kyle." Which King says he got a hold of it, and he said, basically said the same thing. And then
he said he was embarrassed, and if he can't say it, it's a bad thing. Oh, another thing, they did the interview right by the entrance. Didn't you think that Goldust would just show up and like get involved in the interview?
You would think so, yeah. And it's interesting, Kyle, because Razor's playing this doesn't I don't want to say homophobe yet, but he's very kind of freaked out and angered by this whole Goldust coming onto him situation. And a lot of that was sort of like art imitating life, because Scott Hall had a real issue with this whole angle in real life. And it's actually Bruce Pritchard podcast is, by the time this airs, I think it'll be this Friday, their Goldust episode, an entire episode on Goldust will be released. So I'm looking forward to listening to that and hearing a lot of the behind the scenes, especially with this whole Scott Hall situation, and maybe I can shed a little bit more light on it based on what I hear after that. But or you can go listen to it yourselves. But it will be interesting to see where they go with this Razor Goldust situation. Then, Kyle, we close the show out with the Never Say Goodbye, Shawn Michaels, 80s ballad, and it was about, I don't even know what to say to this. It was just a dumb 80s ballad song with Shawn Michaels highlights.
It was like a poor man's Celine Dion, My Heart Will Go On, and it's just it's what I expected. As soon as they said we have a musical presentation, I'm like, oh god, how cringy is this going to be? And it was. It was definitely cringy. And once again, this is like the third, maybe even fourth week in a row where they're ending the show on a real Debbie Downer.
Yeah, pretty much. So Kyle, I gotta say, what were your final thoughts on the final Raw for 1995?
I'm glad 95 is over. I mean, that's the short of it. They need to bring it much harder in 1996 if they want a prayers chance. WCW is doing a much better job with their product. There was some okay booking with today's Raw, but it's sad that once again the thing I enjoyed the most about this show was nostalgia toy commercials. And then obviously, and then also sadly, I like the Brother Love segment with Ted DiBiase. I think Ted DiBiase is at this point the most charismatic person on their fucking show. And also, like I said, I think I think too highly of I almost said Macho Man, $1 Million Man. But I do think he's probably one of the most underrated charismatic people in wrestling, just in general.
Yeah, definitely a great speaker. For me, I agree, Kyle. The show wasn't very good. I thought it started okay, well enough. I mean, you had Fatu and Jeff Jarrett, a match you might not normally think you'd see on Raw. They're usually it's squash matches, and then the main event is kind of where you get your bigger talents against each other. But then after that, it was kind of just went to shit. I do like the Goldust promo, and I think it does hint a little bit towards the future, the Attitude Era, the edgier programming. We'll have to see where it goes. But in the meantime, we need to get Shawn Michaels back because this show's struggling without him. And thankfully, they'll have some time, to go through their holidays, and we'll regroup with the Raw Bowl January 1st, Kyle. So we are done with Raw until next year. That said, guys, if you I forgot to ask you, Kyle. I think we just assumed it, but who won this week?
It's Nitro again. I mean, Nitro right now they just have a better product top to bottom at this point. They have better talent. They tell a better story. They even have more actual matches on the same time. Like I think they are going a little bit longer. They go maybe an extra 5-6 minutes on their show. They're having more meaningful matches, and that's the most important thing. Is I think that a lot of their matches are telling a story or pushing the right people and moving the story forward. And also, like I said, even the conclusions of the matches have impact. And so I feel like Raw has definitely lost its way, especially with Shawn out. It really shows just how important Shawn is to that company, and him being gone. It's a real blow, and there's really no one on the card right now that has the kind of charisma like that to keep the show afloat. And like I said before, 1996 can't come any sooner.
I agree. Nitro is not only was Nitro one of the better Nitros we've seen in a while, but it was a lot better than Raw this week. Raw is going to need to regroup. They need to figure out what they got going on, focus on some good things next year, and Shawn needs to save them. And even though Nitro's a little bit chaotic at times, I think it's just a much better product, and they're developing good storylines going forward themselves. As far as the Nielsen ratings, they agree with us, Kyle. Nitro was a 2.7, up from a 2.6, and I think one of the higher numbers Nitro's put on for since it came out. Meanwhile, Raw, following the post pay-per-view in your house ratings decline, as we typically have seen. It's a 2.3, which is down from the 2.5 it had on Raw the week before. So Nitro is your winner this week, Kyle. And Nitro is going to be your winner next week because it's not, it's Christmas and they are going head-to-head with nothing. They're, Raw is being preempted, so nothing they got to worry about there. So if you, what you guys need to do, go watch that episode and look forward to our Nitro review next week. And then, go hit that subscribe button on iTunes or Google Play. Give us some feedback. Leave us a star rating, whatever the case may be. And go follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, and we're on Facebook. And you can always go to MondayNightTours.com for finding all of our social media, old podcasts, the whole ordeal. And, Kyle, I think, we're going to have a little awards show, too. We may either group that with the Nitro one or do one more final one before the year is out, where we discuss our favorite feuds, worst feuds, best matches, all of that kind of stuff. So, be a fun little show to close out 95 and get ready for 1996 in the Monday Night Wars.
Can't wait.
For Kyle Hogan, I am Josh Kaiser, and we will see you guys next time on the Monday Night Tours.
Have a wonderful Tuesday. See ya.